بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Continuing in our reading of the book حلية طالب العلم, the etiquette of the seeker of knowledge of Shaykh Bakr Abu Zaid rahimahullah. Last week we stopped at point number 5 in the first chapter, in which the Shaykh is continuing to give advice in relation to the student and himself, how the student of knowledge should be with himself. And so the advice he gives here is to lower your wing, which is it's a phrase meaning to be humble, and put arrogance and pride behind you. So a Talib al-Ilm, he shouldn't be someone who is arrogant, he should be one who is humble. And the Shaykh, he says rahimahullah, adorn yourself with personal etiquette, such as abstinence, forbearance, patience, humbleness to the truth, and tranquility by displaying awe, self-possession, lowering one's wing, bearing the humility of learning for the glory of knowledge, and showing humility in the face of the truth. Therefore beware of all the evil qualities that oppose these qualities, since they are blameworthy, and if you do not, you are erecting against yourself a witness that there is a defect in your mind, and it's also a sign that you have been prevented from benefiting from your knowledge and from practicing it. So beware of the haughtiness, for it is hypocrisy and pride, and the Salaf were very wary of it. And so here the etiquette of the student of knowledge is one to be humble towards his fellow peers, humble towards the mashayikh, the ulama who he studies with, and also humble to the people. And so the author is using this term because it's one that's found in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he advised the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, مَخْفِضْ جَنَاحَكَ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, to lower your wing to the believers, which means to be humble and to be near to them. And so the same phraseology is using here, the same term. And to substantiate now this, to prove it, the Shaykh is going to bring a story of one of the Salaf. And this is important because if we want to see how we should be as role models in Talib al-Ilm, we look to those who came before us, those who were our predecessors in knowledge, in excellence. How were the Salaf al-Salih, the pious predecessors? He says, Imam al-Zahabi rahimahullah narrates in the biography of Amr bin al-Aswad al-Anasi, who died in the Khilafah of Abdul Malik bin Marwan, that when he was leaving the masjid one day, he took his left hand with his right hand. Means he held his left hand with his right hand. So they asked him about this, and he said, I did this out of fear that my hand will make a gesture of hypocrisy. So Imam Zahabi say, he held it out of fear that his hand would swing in a manner that indicates pride, and for such an action is considered from haughtiness. And this reaction of this Imam was done almost unconsciously. It means he wasn't even thinking, he did it immediately. And so the Shaykh is using this point to show the humility of the Salaf. And this Imam, Amr bin Aswad al-Anasi, holding his hand, preventing it from swinging. Because we know when someone is arrogant, the way that they walk with their hands swinging to the sides. And this is not the way of the believer. When he walks, he shouldn't walk in that manner. Shaykh Ibn Uthaymin explaining this, he says, Allahu Akbar. هذا صحيح, this is correct in the meaning, in that the movements of the body, they can indicate kibriya, haughtiness and arrogance. And so when somebody is moving with his hands moving right to left, it was a sign of arrogance. And so this Imam, when he realized that, he immediately caught one of his hands from the other. And this narration itself is an authentic narration to this Imam, reported by many. But in this case, in the Kitab Firyabin Sifat al-Munafiqeen, and the Muhaqqiq says Athar Hasan, the narration is Hasan. So narration is authentic to this Imam. And just to substantiate this point, there is a hadith, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he criticized this behavior of walking in a manner where the hands are swinging. It's hadith of Ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma في جامع الترمذي. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا مشت أمتي المطيطية, if my ummah, they walk with their hands swinging. And the hadith continues talking about some of the other things. The end of the hadith says سُلِّتِ شِرَارُهَا عَلَى خِيَارِهَا, Allah will make the worst of the ummah overcome the strongest of them. إذا مشت أمتي مطيطية, if my ummah, they walk arrogantly, means their hands swinging. The ulama, who are the commentators of the hadith, they explain It is a movement where it's of arrogance, مد يدين, where the hands are being swung and spread out. And this is a form of arrogance. Al-Baghawi in Sharh Sunnah, commenting on this in the hadith, he says the word, what it means is walking in an arrogant manner, where the hands are being swung. As Allah says in the Quran, ثُمَّ ذَهَبَ إِلَى أَهْلِهِ يَتَمَطَّى. And then he went, this person who disbelieves in the deen, he went to his house in an arrogant manner. So the fa'idah we take from that is that this manner of walking, this Imam, he understood walking with the hands swinging is a form of arrogance. And so he caught himself automatically, which means the Talib Ilm shouldn't be like this. And so the Shaykh brings this benefit and also shows us how the Salaf were. And when it comes to truth, they were even more humble and more submissive. Means if somebody made a mistake and they clarified to him the mistake, Talib Ilm should immediately retract. So humility in face of one another means the peers, humility in front of the mashayikh, humility in front of the truth. So if the truth comes to you and you find yourself you were mistaken, from humility is that you retract. And this was known from the Salaf al-Salih. The pious predecessors, if they were corrected, they returned to the truth. They did not continue persistently on falsehood. Therefore, if you go to the biography of another Imam, Imam al-Awza'i, rahimahullah, one of the great A'immah from Sham, from the great Salaf, it mentioned about him that he was the quickest person to retract to the truth if he made a mistake. It means Asra' an-Nas, he was the quickest person. If it was clarified something to him was mistaken, they could return back to the truth. And this is how the Salaf were described. People who, when the truth came to them, they accepted it. They were not arrogant in front of it either. And also he continues saying, beware of the disease of the tyrants, which is pride. For indeed pride, greed, and jealousy are the first sins that Allah was disobeyed with. It means in relation to shaitan. And so your loftiness above your teachers from pride, and your arrogance towards someone who benefits you is from amongst those who are lesser than you. In knowledge is pride. And your shortcomings in practicing your knowledge is the sludge of pride, a sign of deprivation in the blessings of knowledge. And then the author, he brings some lines of poetry to show now how if the person who's proud, that in reality he'll be against knowledge. Because the more you study, you learn about the evidences of humility. And you learn about the outcome of those who are arrogant. So what happens then? You humble yourself. But if someone is arrogant, then in reality he'll be at war with knowledge. As the poet has said, العلم حرب للفتى المتعالي كالسيل حرب للمكان العالي. The poet, he said that knowledge wars against a lofty, arrogant youth, just as the flood attacks the high places. And so here, in explaining this, Shaykh Uthaymeen says that the one who is an arrogant, lofty youth means he thinks himself to be someone great. It's not possible أن يدرك العلم, that he can obtain knowledge. لأن العلم حرب له, knowledge will be at war with him. Because if he's arrogant and knowledge is teaching him something and training him a different way, then he's at war with it. The same way the one who is in a high place, the water is at war with him as the flood increases the water, and then eventually will catch up to him. These lines of poetry are not described to any particular author, but they are quoted by different ulama, amongst them Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah, and in Kitab al-Tibyan fi Adab Hamalat al-Quran. He quotes these lines of poetry in relation to the student of knowledge. And as well, they mentioned they've been described, these poetry has been ascribed to random or without a ascription to a particular author by other ulama. In this case, he says the footnote, Ihya Ulumuddin of Imam al-Ghazali. So the ulama, they quote these lines of poetry. So what is it teaching us? He says, sticking to the ground, which is a term for extreme humbleness. And so we take a benefit then. He says, pitting yourself and swallowing your pride and controlling it when it leans towards haughtiness or arrogance or love of being noticed, and other evil qualities associated with knowledge that destroy it. Take away its reverential quality and extinguish its light. So the more knowledge you gain, or the higher you become in status, the stricter your adherence becomes to this, and by this you will achieve the greatest happiness and a platform that will envy you for, that people envy you for. And this is the reality. For the one who is arrogant, he doesn't benefit, for he thinks he knows everything. As the one who is humble, then he will learn, continue to learn. The same way, if you use the analogy of a low-lying land, when the rain falls, it doesn't fall or doesn't be contained in highlands. It rather is contained in land that is low. It means the valley will collect the water, whereas the highland will just drip the water away. So in reality, if a student of knowledge is humble, the more he will grow in knowledge. But if he's arrogant, then this person won't benefit, and people will not benefit from them likewise. Then the author, rahimahullah, he brings a narration. He says, "And upon the authority of Abdullah bin Imam al-Hujjah, who is the son of one of the narrators of the Imam of the narrators of the 6 books of Hadith, or narrator found in the 6 books of Hadith, Bakr bin Abdullah al-Muzani, rahimahullah, that he said, I heard a person narrate that when my father was standing on Mount Arafah, he became soft-hearted and said, if I wasn't among them, means the congregation, I would have said that they have been forgiven. Means had I not been amongst the people now, I would have said everyone will be forgiven. Imam Dhahabi said what is being said here is that in this way, the slave of Allah should swallow his pride and he should pity himself. Means this Imam is considering himself a cause of the prevention of the forgiveness of Allah. Even though when Allah forgives the believers when they come together in Arafah, but he's thinking about him so bad, he says, because of me they won't be forgiven. SubhanAllah. This is an Imam who's speaking. And so this narration likewise, it's a narration which is thabit, authentic narration, reported by Imam Dhahabi in Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, and others, they also reported, Tabaqat al-Sa'i, Tarikh, Ibn Ma'in, and others. So here we take a lesson from the Salaf, how they were. That someone may be standing in Arafah and saying, I'm here now, so Allah will forgive me. I deserve the forgiveness. Whereas he's saying, I don't think the people will forgive him because of my presence here. Means that how much he was swallowing his pride. And this is how the student should be. They should be one who is easy for them to think lowly of themselves. Shaykh Uthaymin, rahimahullah, commenting, mentions that the ibarat, the expression here that are narrated from the Salaf, what they intend is tawada', the humility. Not su'adhan billah. It's not intending that they're thinking bad about Allah, that Allah won't forgive the people because of them. Rather, he's thinking about his own self and being humble. And that he would see himself in the state that he is not someone great. Otherwise, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He forgives His servants. وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. And your Lord says, call upon me, I will forgive you. And so we take the benefit here that the person should have good thoughts about Allah, but this is by way of humility that they said this. And this is how it should be, that someone should not think themselves so great. And if you think carefully, you will see that those who are most humble, they are also those who are most beneficial and those most aware of themselves. Whereas those who are arrogant, they don't know their own level, nor are they able to benefit themselves and others because of this blinding arrogance. The author then moves to point number 6, which is contentment, zuhud. Contentment and zuhud, asceticism. And it says, adorn yourself with contentment and asceticism. And the reality of zuhud is in the haram, and to distance yourself from boundaries by abstaining from the shubuhat and wishing for what is in the people's possessions. So this is a quote of zuhud from Zarnuji in Ta'reem al-Muta'allim. He mentions that zuhud in reality is in relation to that which is haram. Zuhud means to abstain and to become aesthetic from that which is haram, and that which is shubuhat, doubtful, and also stay away from that which is in the people's hands. So this is one definition of zuhud. Many definitions of zuhud were given. And the ulama, when you read the kutub about zuhud, you find that everyone has slightly different definitions in relation to it. So it's important when we talk about zuhud, asceticism, the ulama have different definitions. But that which seems to be, wallahu a'lam, the most comprehensive of them, what Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah mentions, that zuhud tarku ma la yanfa'u fil akhirah. That the definition of zuhud is to leave off what doesn't benefit your akhirah, or doesn't benefit you in the akhirah. Tarku ma la yanfa'u fil akhirah. To leave off that which doesn't benefit you in the hereafter. And then he adds, wal wara'u. And wara'u can be translated as scrupulousness or cautiousness. Tarku ma yakhafu dararuhu fil akhirah. So wara' is that which you leave off out of fear of it harming you in the akhirah. But zuhud, which would take for now, tarku ma la yanfa'uka fil akhirah. Whatever doesn't benefit in the akhirah. So some ulama mentioned that there is no zuhud in the some say that even zuhud is not in the haram. Some of the ulama, they went so far as in zuhud is only related to that which is halal. Means we're not talking about the haram you have to stay away from already. That which is halal and doubtful, then you have zuhud in there. But what is more correct to say it in terms of a more comprehensive one is what Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah mentions here. Tarku ma la yanfa'u fil akhirah. Leaving off that which does not benefit you, or that which does not benefit you in the hereafter. Mentioned by Ibn Qayyim in Madarij al-Salikin, volume 2, page 10. quoted by Ibn Qayyim in Madarij al-Salikin, volume 2, page 10. So here the author is encouraging Talib Ilm to have zuhud, which is important because if you think about today's time, sad to say, many people have then now made a Talib Ilm or a Da'i to be something of glory, something is glorified. And they use terms to glorify the Shaykh, even though the status of a Talib Ilm, a Da'i is high. It is not to mean that this person is one who is seeking worldly life. They're not seeking the worldly life or to come closer by it through their ilm and through their status. And so what the Mashayikh, they warn against is the Shaykh becoming then someone who is not aesthetic from the dunya, for the ilm that teaches you that. So the Shaykh brings down some statements to show you how the Salaf used to warn against this character of being greedy for wealth in the dunya. Rather, you should be content. It was narrated from Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah that he said, if a person sincerely advised the wisest of people, he would encourage him to be amongst the aesthetic. So this is a quote that's been narrated from Imam Shafi'i. Allahu a'lam if it's authentic from him, but Bayhaqi in his kitab Manaqib al-Shafi'i, he narrates it. لو أوصى إنسان أعقل الناس صرف إلى الزهاد. That if someone were to give the advice sincerely to the wisest of people, who would encourage them to become from the aesthetics, people who are aesthetic from the dunya. And it was narrated from Muhammad bin Hassan al-Shaybani rahimahullah. Anyone knows who he is? Muhammad bin Hassan al-Shaybani? Yes, one of the two biggest students of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. He's also a student of Imam Malik and a contemporary of Imam Shafi'i. So he says, or was said to him, would you not write a book on zuhud? And he said, I have already written a book on transactions, on buyur. He said to him, would you not write a book on the subject of zuhud? So he replied, قَدْ صَنَّفْتُ كِتَابٍ فِي الْبُيُوعِ. I've already written a book about the transactions in business. And so what is intended by this, Shaykh Bakr quotes, the intention or the meaning behind this statement that the true aesthetic person is the one who's cautious from falling to shubuhat and the things which are disliked, whether in business or other than business. So if he wrote a book about business to teach you about what's halal and haram in business, so that's enough of a zuhud. If you follow this is the true goal of being a zahid, to stay from the haram and stay within the halal. And so this narration, right, some of the ulama, they also commented, right, they mentioned this is what it's intending. For the asl of the person who's a zahid is to be away from the haram and to be only in the halal. So this is important now. Someone is a businessman, he needs to know the halal from haram. So he said, this is just by my authoring this book, this is my way of teaching people the zuhud. Shaykh Uthaymin comments saying, لمن عرف البيوع وأحكامها, the one who knows transactions, business transactions and the rulings, and protects himself from haram, and he will only be in halal, فهذا هو الزاهد. This is really the zahid. And sad to say now, many of us, maybe we didn't study this chapter, so it's encouraging to study it. Because no one wants to do business and make haram money. It's also narrated in Tirmidhi that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu in his time, no one will be inside the markets except they would be first be taught, and they had to have learned the chapter about biyur. So this teaches you that the markets are places where people they make haram money without knowledge at times. So if you want to be a zahid, make sure your money is halal. Know the halal and haram business transaction, and leave up the shubuhat. For that is the essence of zuhud. It doesn't entail when we say zahid that someone has to be hermit. Some people, when they think they hear zahid, they say it means someone's a hermit. They stay in the away from society. They live in a cave or something like this. That's not the intention. Because in reality, someone can still be wealthy and still be a zahid. How? Because the money and the wealth he has is not in his heart, it's in his hand. So pay attention. Some people, they misunderstand. And they ask to have ilm about that. Because it's possible someone could be a zahid and he has a nice car, a nice house. Yes, as long as it's not in his heart. Means that if he loses it tomorrow, he won't be bothered. The same if he gained it, everything's praised to Allah, belongs to Allah. So it's important that we don't misunderstand the intention of the zahid. And then the Shaykh, he says that the seeker of knowledge should be moderate in his lifestyle, in a way that does not dishonor him by maintaining himself and those who are dependent upon him, so he does not put himself in a position of humility and shame. So balance. A Talib Ilm shouldn't be in a state where other people will look down upon him, where he's carrying knowledge. At the same time, he should not be in a state where he is glorifying the dunya and becoming greedy. So he should be in a moderate state, taking care of himself, and this is the best way. وَخَيْرُ رِزْقٍ كَفَافًا كَمَا قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. The best of provisions in that which is sufficient. This is important. Sufficiency is the key, contentment. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam also mentioned in the hadith, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ أَسْلَمَ. He is successful, the one who has accepted Islam. وَرِزْقَ كَفَافًا. And he has been provided with that which is sufficient for him. وَقَنَّعَهُ اللَّهُ بِمَا آتَاهُ. And Allah has made him content with that which He has given him and has allotted for him in the dunya. What we take from this is that in reality that Talib Ilm should be between the two. Not to be extravagant with all this wealth and money, because people will get the wrong message then. What is the intention of seeking knowledge? You should obtain wealth and power. And the opposite, that such that the person is not so humiliated that he has to outstretch his hand to the people and beg, until he's at the dependency of the people, becomes iyadun nas, one who is dependent on the people. And so many of the Salaf would also discourage that Talib Ilm becomes to that level where he's humiliated, that people look down upon him, for he's a student of knowledge. So we need to be in the middle. And if he has dependence upon him, then he needs to take care of them, as the Messenger ﷺ commanded us to be the best to our families, as well as the worst of those people, those who are deficient or who are falling short in relation to those who are dependent. The Shaykh then brings the contemporary Shaykh to bring the example. Shaykh Muhammad bin Al-Amin Al-Shinqiti, rahimahullah, who died in the year 1393 Hijri. And if you remember correctly, we studied his work with the brother Majid, and we're talking about Islam as the complete religion. This is the Imam and the Mufassir, the one some of the ulama have claimed he is the Shaykh al-Islam of our time. This Imam is the Shaykh al-Islam, the most befitting to be given that title of our time. And this Imam is a big Shaykh. Many of us, maybe we're not so familiar with him, but Shaykh Bakr Zaid studied more than 20 years, or about 20 years with the Shaykh. He stayed close to him, made mulazama with him. And we said at the beginning of the book, this is one of his biggest teachers. So he says, this Shaykh, rahimahullah, took very little from the worldly life. And I used to see him, and he could not differentiate between the values of different wealth and the currencies. It means he couldn't differentiate between the currency, the banknotes, because he was a Zahid. He said himself to me, I came from a country, meaning Shinqiti, Mauritania, with me is a treasure that is very seldom found in the possession of anybody, and it's contentment. And if I wanted to higher status, I would have known how to achieve it, but I chose not to in exchange for the worldly life, I chose not to exchange this worldly life for the hereafter, and I do not give my knowledge to attain worldly desires. So this was his Shaykh. Imagine a Shaykh alim like this, he was able to differentiate between the banknotes. It means that he was such a Zahid, it didn't bother him, rahimahullah. And this is an Imam who was an alim in tafsir, in Arabic language, hadith. Some describe him as an ocean without boundaries when he spoke about ilm. Means from his mind he would just narrate, it was unbelievable. In our time, the other mashayikh were quite similar to this, who their zuhud, their asceticism in the dunya was known. And from those is the Shaykh of our time, amongst the many ulama, Shaykh Imam al-Wadi'i, rahimahullah. And you find in these mashayikh, when you read their biographies, how they used to be. It means there were people who they were not concerned with the dunya. So if you read their biographies, you find sometimes ajaib. For example, it's narrated in the biography of Shaykh Muqbil rahimahullah that he was the kind of person who once Talib came to seek some kind of provision or some kind of wealth for a need, and the Shaykh, he told the one who was in charge for the money to give him what he needs. And he was seeking at that time, that Talib, 5,000 riyal. It's a lot of money. And the Shaykh told him to give, and he gave. And the Shaykh used to give, he says, without even counting. At that time, just give him, that's it. And this is the kind of attitude he had towards this wealth. It says that even when the one who he was sent to give the money, he asked him, what were you sent to give? He said, the Shaykh said to give me, and he gave him. Then the Shaykh said to give him the 5,000. He said, I don't think the Shaykh knows how much money we have here. It means just to give. He didn't even bother if we have that much or not. It means he wasn't concerned with the dunya. And even his physical appearance was such that some people would find him to be that he didn't appear like how all the mashayikh would. It was very simple. And this is actually from some of the Salaf as well, that they would appear this way. And I mentioned a narration to show this. Some of the Salaf used to be this way as well. A'mash rahimahullah, he narrates, Kuntu idha ra'aytu mujahidan. He said, when I used to look at Mujahid in Jabr, was one of the biggest students of Ibn Abbas, izraytuhu mubtadiran. I used to look down upon him. Means the way that he used to appear, I used to think he was a herder of the donkeys. That means the way he's looking, I used to think he was one who takes care of the donkeys. It means appearance, so simple. But when he used to speak, إذا تكلم رجل عربي. When he spoke, he was like an Arab, pure Arab in his language and his eloquence. Another version, Imam Dhahabi, he narrates, he says when he spoke, it was like diamonds coming out of his mouth. And this narration is authentic, Sahih, it's A'mash. means that some of the Salaf, in their appearance, you couldn't tell because of their clothing, he was even alim. Means this person a person of knowledge. But he said, I used to look down upon him. I used to think he was destitute and poor. When I saw him wear simple and inexpensive clothes, I used to think he was a donkey herder. And when he spoke, subhanallah, he was a person of knowledge. He says, even I thought sometimes the way he appeared, as if one who was not only a herder, but one who was a herder and was upset because he lost some of his flock. So that's how he used to think when he saw him. But when he spoke, subhanallah. And some of the Salaf were described this way. That was the example of Mujahid. And also some of our Mashaykh, as the Shaykh quotes his own teacher, Shaykh Al-Shinqaiti rahimahullah. Inshallah, we'll end with this much to the nearest al-Maghrib. And the Shaykh, he moves from this chapter towards the next point, or within the same chapter, where he talks about adorning yourself with ilm. Ilm means how you should adorn yourself. And this book is called Haliyah Talib Ilm. And so that part we'll take the week after. For next week there will be our guest speaker, Brother Ismail Ghazali, visiting us, inshallah. So we will have the lessons the week after that, and preparing for this preparation for this seminar. Inshallah, if anyone has any questions or something they want to add or mention, inshallah. Hey. A'mash, his student mentioned this. No.
What's the condition of the book,
Ihya Ulumuddin? Alhamdulillah, we put something forth. The ulama, they criticize the book for its weakness in terms of what it narrates of weak hadith and fabricated hadith, sometimes even narrating things which are not really Islamic. So it's a book which, even though perhaps the intent of the book was to teach the people the religion, but it's a book full of weaker narrations, and it has with also incorrect statements in Aqidah. So it's a book that ulama have criticized. And you can see some of the things that we've translated about that book from the Ahlul Ilm.
What's the best way to deal with for a student of knowledge to deflect arrogance or pride?
So what's the best way for someone to deflect the arrogance and pride? He should remember that the knowledge he's gaining is either proof for him against him. And he should always remember how much knowledge he assumes he has, someone has more knowledge. وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. But everyone who has knowledge is one more knowledgeable. So if he thinks he's someone big, he should know those ulama who perceive who are bigger, and the Salaf. Also, he should try humble himself by doing many ibadat that are going to lower him, and to do things which are going to keep him away from feeling that he's bigger than him was. It's very important that he remembers Allah and he remembers the dangers of thinking that he is someone who is above others. And these are some of the examples of others. But because of the time, inshallah, we'll end with this much. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.